I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee, when my parents slid a stack of legal papers toward me. "Just sign it," my mother said, as if she were asking me to pass the salt. "It's only fair," my father added, "after all we've done for you." The document was clear. It would add both of them to the deed of my home, with rights of survivorship. Meaning once I died, it would be theirs. No questions, no conditions. And the worst part? They were serious. Dead serious. I blinked at them, my mind racing. For the past 8 years, I'd paid every bill, adjusted my life to care for them, even gave up dating because they didn't want strangers in our house. But this was betrayal in black and white ink. When I hesitated, my father accused me of being selfish. My mother started crying, saying I owed them for giving me life. And then she said something I'll never forget. Well, the plan was working perfectly until now. That's when I knew. Something wasn't right. And what I discovered next, buried in the pages of her old diary, shattered every belief I had about my family. Have your parents ever made you feel like you were just a tool for their survival? If you were in my shoes, would you have signed? Let me know in the comments. And subscribe, because what came next changed everything. My name is Olivia Sanchez. I'm 54 years old, and I work as a university administrator in Denver, Colorado. I'm not flashy. I don't live beyond my means, but everything I have, every piece of furniture, every dent in the walls, every faded photo on the mantle, I earned it. Alone. I grew up in a house that never stayed a house for long. My dad was always between jobs. One year we were in Albuquerque, the next in Topeka. Mom made it work with coupons and casseroles, but there was always this hum of anxiety, like a low vibration under every conversation. What if we have to move again? What if Dad gets laid off again? So by the time I reached my 40s, my biggest dream wasn't marriage or a promotion. It was a home, not just a roof over my head, but roots. A place that didn't depend on anyone else's paycheck. And at 42, after years of budgeting, saving, and turning down vacations, I bought it. A modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet Denver neighborhood. My sanctuary. At first, it was everything I dreamed of. I had a tiny garden in the back, a sunroom where I drank coffee in the morning, and a spare bedroom I turned into my reading and writing space, my haven. Then came the call. It was my mother. Her voice already laced with dread. "Olivia, we need to talk. We can't afford our apartment anymore. Your father's retirement didn't go as planned." I was hesitant. I really was. But they're my parents. What was I supposed to do? Say no and leave them homeless? I said, "Come stay with me, just for a few months. We'll figure something out together." That was 8 years ago. What started as a temporary arrangement quickly became permanent. I gave up my office so they could have a room. I added grab bars in the bathroom, changed my work schedule to drive them to appointments, picked up their medications, paid for groceries, utilities, insurance, everything. Their Social Security barely covered their prescriptions, and my dad's pension? Gone faster than payday. I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing, but there were signs. Little red flags that, at the time, I brushed off. Like how my mom never liked any of the men I dated, or how every time I planned a weekend trip, one of them would suddenly feel unwell, and how your house slowly turned into our house. My dad would say, you should really let me hang those family portraits in the hallway. It's our home too." At first, I thought I was imagining it, that maybe I was being too sensitive. But somewhere along the way, I stopped inviting people over. I stopped dating. And I stopped seeing this house as mine. Still, I stayed quiet. I buried it. Because I was raised to believe that good daughters don't complain. They sacrifice, they endure, they keep the family together. It wasn't until they slid that legal document across the table until they tried to make themselves owners of the very thing I bled for, that I finally saw the truth. This wasn't about gratitude. It was about control. And the worst part? It had always been. After that moment at the kitchen table, something in me shifted. For years, I'd brushed off the subtle digs, the guilt trips, the way they occupied my space as if it had always belonged to them. But now, with those documents in my hand, legally binding paperwork that would give them full co-ownership of my home, it was like I finally saw it for what it was. A slow, calculated invasion. When I told them I wouldn't sign, the room fell silent. My father clenched his jaw, stared me down. "You ungrateful girl," he spat. "After everything we've done for you." My mother started crying. "We sacrificed our whole lives for you, Olivia. Do you think it's easy growing old and having nothing to show for it? You owe us this." I stood my ground, trembling but firm. "This house is mine," I said quietly. "I worked for it. I built this life." That's when she said it. That one line that echoed through my bones. Well, the plan was working perfectly until now. She didn't even realize what she'd let slip, but I did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to convince myself I'd misheard. That she was emotional and said something careless, but my gut knew better. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. The way they shut the door when they talked. The whispered conversations I wasn't meant to hear. The quick glance they exchanged whenever I walked into a room. I remembered all the times they'd told me they were just staying for a few months, that they'd figure things out, and yet, 8 years later, they hadn't even looked for other options. I started to question everything. Had they always planned to live here forever? Had they ever really seen me as anything other than a safety net? One afternoon, while they were out for their usual bingo night, I went into their room. I wasn't proud of it. I felt like a teenager snooping through drawers, but the feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I needed answers. At first, I found the usual things: prescription bottles, old greeting cards, receipts. But tucked beneath a stack of papers in my mother's bottom dresser drawer was a faded blue notebook. Her handwriting was unmistakable. Slanted, neat, looping letters I'd seen on every childhood lunchbox and birthday card. I opened it. The first few pages were normal. Lists of groceries, medical notes, reminders. But then, it changed. Page after page, line after line. Detailed thoughts, reflections, observations about me. Olivia seems hesitant again about dating. That's good. Less distraction. Must keep her occupied. The more she works, the less she questions. Pushing for ownership slowly, emotional pressure works better than logic. My hands started shaking. She said something about wanting to leave the house to Emily. Unacceptable. Must intervene. If we can get on the deed, we're safe. She won't kick us out once it's legal. It was all there. Their strategy, their manipulation, their intent. Not just to live with me, but to secure my house. To isolate me. To keep me dependent. To cut me off from love, from friendships, from freedom. My chest tightened as I flipped further. If she ever finds this, she'll never forgive us. She was right. In that moment, something inside me broke, but something else woke up. A part of me I hadn't felt in years. The version of myself that existed before they moved in. Before the guilt. Before the gaslighting. Before I let them rewrite the meaning of family.
I closed the diary, took a deep breath, and slipped it into my own drawer. It was time. Time to take back my life. Once the decision was made, I stopped hesitating. I wasn't going to be the good daughter anymore. Not if that meant sacrificing myself on the altar of guilt. For the first time in years, I let go of the idea that keeping the peace was more important than protecting my peace. I began with logistics.
I called every senior living facility within a 25-mile radius, cross-checking prices, services, wait lists. I created a spreadsheet, emailed it to them, printed a hard copy, and placed it neatly on the kitchen counter. I included 3 viable options that fit their income bracket. They didn't say thank you. They didn't even acknowledge it, just glared at the paper like it was a death sentence. But I didn't stop there. I called my lawyer, the same one who helped me close on my house 12 years ago. I told him everything, sent him a scanned copy of the diary. He reviewed the house deed and helped me file a formal letter stating I was the sole owner, and that any attempt to add names without legal action would be considered coercion. Then I did something that felt petty, but necessary. I had the locks changed. Not because I was kicking them out yet, no, they still had a few weeks left. But because for the first time in years, I wanted to feel secure in my own home. I gave them keys to the new locks, of course. But I was the one who handed them over, a small detail. But to me, it was everything. From there, I shifted focus to my own healing. I reconnected with Emily, my niece, the one I hadn't seen in months because my mother claimed she was a bad influence. She cried when I told her everything. "Aunt Liv, I always knew something was off. You never looked happy anymore." We started meeting for brunch every Sunday, and little by little, I remembered what it felt like to have real conversations, to laugh, to be seen. Meanwhile, back home, the atmosphere grew colder. My parents didn't speak to me unless absolutely necessary. My father kept turning up the TV volume like it was some kind of protest. My mother began forgetting to clean up after herself, leaving dishes in the sink, letting laundry pile up. It didn't rattle me, because I had a plan, and I was sticking to it. 2 weeks before the move-out deadline, I visited the senior complex I'd shortlisted for them. It was modest but clean, with friendly staff and an on-site nurse. I even met with the manager to discuss move-in logistics. They qualified based on Social Security and pension alone. When I brought home the signed lease agreement, my mother refused to look at it. She sat in her chair like a statue and muttered, "You'll regret this someday." But I wouldn't. The week before the move, I hired a moving company, paid for it myself. I labeled boxes with care, wrapped their belongings in the same towels I'd bought when they moved in. Not because I wanted to be kind, but because I wanted to be done with it, cleanly and without bitterness. The final day came on a sunny Saturday morning. The movers arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. By 11:30, the last box was on the truck. My father didn't say a word, just stood on the porch with his arms crossed. My mother gave one final parting shot. "Don't expect us to come running when you're old and alone." I didn't flinch. "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad. Take care of yourselves." And with that, I shut the door and locked it. But the real execution wasn't the eviction. It was everything that came after. I stood in the middle of the now quiet house and let the silence wash over me. It didn't feel empty. It felt open. That afternoon, I moved my reading chair back into the spare room, my office. I threw out the medicine reminders stuck to the fridge. I repainted the walls a soft green, like new beginnings. I ordered a new mattress, one that didn't sag in the middle, like my backbone used to. And finally, I took the diary, now sealed in a Ziploc bag, and placed it in a locked drawer with a label on the front. The line I will never cross again. The first few days after they left were eerily quiet. For the first time in almost a decade, I could hear myself think in my own home. No late-night news blaring from the living room. No passive-aggressive sighs behind closed doors. No guilt-laced questions like, "Are you really going out again?" Just silence. And then the phone rang. I knew it was coming. The family fallout. It started with my aunt, my mother's older sister. "How could you throw them out like that, Olivia? They're in their 70s. I explained calmly that I had found Mom's diary, that it documented years of deliberate manipulation. I even offered to email excerpts, but she wasn't interested. "I don't care what was written in some journal," she snapped. "You don't abandon your parents." Click. Next came my cousin Luis, the one who never called unless he needed help moving. "Do you even realize how bad this looks? People are talking, Liv." "I know," I said. "Let them." But the worst call came from my own godmother, Tia Carmen. She didn't yell. She just sounded disappointed. "I always thought you were different," she said. "Better than this." Those words stung more than all the rest combined. Because for most of my life, being better was my entire identity. The one who worked hard, the one who didn't complain, the one who showed up even when no one else did. But I wasn't that version of me anymore. And maybe that was the point. I didn't respond to the messages after that. I didn't explain, defend, or justify. Because I realized something. Explaining yourself to people who benefit from your silence is just another form of surrender. So I stayed quiet and kept going. At the senior apartment complex, my parents settled in with icy pride. I paid the first month's rent, dropped off their labeled boxes, and left without a hug. We spoke briefly a few times, mostly about paperwork, medications, or mail forwarding. But there was no warmth, just distance. And strangely, that distance felt like oxygen. But not everyone judged me. One evening, about 2 weeks after they'd moved out, I opened my front door to find Emily, my niece, standing there with a grocery bag. "Dinner's on me tonight," she said with a grin. "I figured you could use some company that didn't come with emotional blackmail." We laughed, really laughed, for the first time in forever. Over enchiladas and wine, she told me what it had been like watching from the sidelines. How they'd talk about you like you were a burden, even when you were doing everything for them. She looked me straight in the eye. "Aunt Liv, you didn't abandon them. They abandoned the idea of treating you like a person." That night, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because for once, someone saw me. I started to reclaim more than just my home. I reclaimed myself. I went back to yoga, reconnected with 2 old friends from college. I even reactivated my dating profile, something I hadn't touched in years because my mother had once called it desperate. And then one morning, I got a card in the mail. It was from my mother. No return address, no apology, just a short, stiff message in her perfect cursive. "We're fine. You don't have to worry about us. I hope you find what you're looking for. Mom." I stared at it for a while. Not angry, not relieved, just done. And maybe that's the hardest part of growing up. Realizing that the people you once looked up to are sometimes the ones you have to protect yourself from. But I didn't need their approval anymore. Not after what I'd survived. Not after what I'd reclaimed. They had played the long game, trying to turn my kindness into ownership. But in the end, I learned something they never expected. I don't owe anyone my life just because they gave me one. It's been over a year since my parents moved out. The silence in this house no longer feels unfamiliar. It feels earned. I still wake up early, still sip my coffee by the window. But now I do it without holding my breath, without wondering if someone's going to come downstairs and ask me to give up another piece of myself. I finally turned the guest room, my old office, into something new. It's now my writing space. There's a soft reading chair in the corner, shelves of books I once packed away, and a little sign above the window that says, "My life, my rules, my peace." Emily visits often. We cook together. We laugh a lot. She brings her boyfriend over, and I don't panic about whether someone else will approve. The walls of this house no longer echo with obligation. They carry joy, possibility, choice. As for my parents, we still talk. Briefly, on holidays or birthdays. There's no closeness, no warm reconciliation. But I'm okay with that. Because now I know the difference between family and familiarity, between love and leverage. I don't regret helping them, but I do regret how long it took me to realize that helping doesn't mean sacrificing your entire identity. To anyone listening who's been told they owe someone their time, their energy, their future, please hear this. You do not owe anyone the life they never built for themselves. It's okay to love people from a distance. It's okay to say no, even when it shakes the foundation of everything you were raised to believe. I was called selfish, cruel, cold, but in the end, reclaiming my life was the kindest thing I've ever done for myself. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's story, so be it. At least now, I'm finally the hero in mine.